On this anniversary of 9/11, a manhunt is underway following Wednesday's assassination of a conservative media personality. Charlie Kirk was speaking at Utah Valley University on September 10th when he was shot. Kirk died at a local hospital shortly after. To talk about this and more is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. She's the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. Lisa, there are so many people in utter shock regarding the Charlie Kirk assassination, especially those in Christian and conservative circles. And when I was on my way to a fundraiser and I got the news that he had succumbed to his injuries, I was shocked to hear that as well. Do you feel something is very wrong with our political climate if having respectful talks and debates with people who don't agree with you can cost you your life?
Right. It's so tragic on so many levels. I actually had the pleasure of knowing Charlie Kirk. He was a teenager when he came to one of my talks in New York, and he patiently waited for the end of the talk, and he approached me very respectfully. I would say even a touch shy, but there was this glimmer in his eyes and energy that was undeniable. And he told me that he's been following me for a while and he listens to my work. And it was something that stood out about him. And then obviously he built this incredible following platform, but more than anything, a movement that resonated with so many young people who felt like their political views were not represented in our country. And it's interesting to have this conversation with you on 9/11 and another very dark moment in our nation's history where we had a similar conversation in the aftermath about freedom. That's exactly what we all fight for. That's exactly what many of us put our lives on the line for in varying degrees. Charlie Kirk being one of the ones who bridged that gap in such a respectful way, in a way where he showed respect, curiosity, he listened, and really always wanted to extend a hand, um, not to be, boastful or feel like he's superior, but more so to have dialogue and to invite people to have those conversations and those debates. And really, no one can fill his place. He was someone who represented so many things, but particularly to young people, and more than anything else, a father to those two very young children. I actually just came back from DC, and I was among political colleagues when we found out that he got shot before knowing the severity uh, of how badly he was shot. And we're stunned. We're stunned about the security, about how this could happen, about why anyone would want to harm such a person. And I just 2 nights before that, on Monday night, was sitting in my hotel room and I turned on Fox News and I saw him doing an interview about a recent poll that Turning Point USA had done about the importance of marriage and having children among, the left and the right. And I really, at that moment, thought to myself, even though I've known him for years, I said, he's one of the only people, regardless of whether you agree with him or not, who practices what he preaches. His lifestyle, his virtue is on display for all to see. This is the life that he's chosen to live, and not just preach about. So a big loss across the board, a big loss and a dark moment in our history.
Yeah, because it's one thing to disagree with somebody, because that's part of freedom. And you mentioned the importance of freedom, especially on the anniversary of 9/11. But to take someone's life away, not just take someone's life away, but also to deny a wife and kids their
Right.
husband and father, like that's far beyond the
Or-
what can be tolerated in North America. Now we know that a manhunt is underway, and the FBI has released images of a person of interest. What's the latest in locating this suspect?
Two suspects have been arrested and then released because they didn't the story didn't line up with what they're looking for. There is now a new picture. I mean, who knows? This is changing by the hour. There is a tip line. They're looking for any sort of clues, but this looks like a pretty sophisticated, well-orchestrated plan. They did find the weapon at the scene, so wait and see. I more than anything, don't appreciate any of the speculation that's being done online. And worse than that, those who are celebrating this death. And Naveen, this is not something I want to bring more attention to, but to speak about how, and I tweeted this out, you don't have to have agreed with him to mourn his death. You just have to be human to understand how two young children lost their father, how a wife that is so young just became widowed for something so incredibly senseless, to take someone's life because you don't agree with their talking points. But to see the scope of these comments online with people celebrating, people commenting, and I'm talking about these aren't just trolls or bots, these are people who actually have blue checks on their accounts. I mean, there is a major problem in America if this is the way that we think we have to handle those who we disagree with.
Unbelievable. And this comes just a few short weeks after the fatal stabbing of 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska, who was randomly killed while riding the train home from work in Charlotte, North Carolina. Again, another senseless murder. What's the latest on this, Lisa? Because I've been hearing that there's actually millions of dollars on the table from some affluent people that want to see some murals put up in her memory.
Yeah, she also, obviously not, there's a lot of differences in these two cases and some similarities. But, she was a hardworking Ukrainian who ironically came to the United States to find safety and security away from her war-torn country of Ukraine. And was coming off of a shift working at a pizza store and was really in the wrong place at the wrong time. This wasn't a targeted attack. This was something that was again senseless and just crime. Crime, crime, crime. I mean, why can't someone ride the subway coming off of a shift from work and not have to worry about the person sitting behind her? This has become such a big deal, as it should, in any one of these cases, but because it hadn't been reported and because it has been politicized. So, there's a movement to really bring attention to this case, to underscore this case. And in both this and the Charlie Kirk murder or assassination, as some people are calling it, Donald Trump has called for the death penalty. And I think, it's interesting. It's interesting because I know, in our country we have due process. There is, a way to work up towards the death penalty, obviously, in the court of law. But in these two cases, I think Donald Trump, and I don't want to speak for him, but it seems that he wants to set really a tone, an example. This will not be tolerated in our country. And I don't know, it's hard. It was very difficult waking up this morning. It was very difficult getting the news as somebody, not just that knew Charlie, but it works in a profession where we do public speaking. There are people who disagree with us. So to think that I can't come home to my child because I am saying something that somebody doesn't agree with, it's not something that's easy to digest right now and to come to terms with. And again, all of us thinking about these families, whether it is the Ukrainian refugees family or Charlie Kirk's family, to lose a life so senselessly when you are working or living for freedom. And in both her case, to escape war and to think that you're seeking refuge in a place that offers you freedom and security, and for him to feel that a college campus is not safe, the place where he made his mark, where he is, such a figure in not just, the right wing, but really bringing that conversation and allowing anyone to step up to the podium and anyone to step up to the microphone and ask him a question. Somebody who has really, again, lived that truth and allowed people to speak freely and has tolerated multiple, points of view, wasn't offered the same in return.
Absolutely. Turning our eyes overseas now. Earlier this week, Lisa, tensions were rising in the Middle East as Israel targeted Hamas leaders in Qatar while they were discussing a U.S. proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, Qatar has threatened to retaliate against Israel in the wake of this airstrike, and Qatar's prime minister is calling the situation a decisive movement for the Middle East. Well, tell us more about that.
It's an interesting turning point, if it even is a turning point in this war. Just to bring everyone up to speed, we're almost 2 years since the October 7th attacks, and Hamas is still refusing to give back the remaining hostages. They are refusing to surrender in this war. Donald Trump has multiple times since coming into office demanded that those hostages be given back. In the meantime, there are multiple fronts fighting Israel, terror proxies that are being funded by Iran's regime. And Qatar, who's supposed to be the honest broker here, has been nothing like the honest broker. They have not pushed for the hostages to be returned. They continue to harbor Hamas terrorists who happen to be on Qatar soil, and they live there and they prosper there and they are billionaires there. For them to say, well, this means, we are going to now think about this war differently and retaliate towards Israel, I don't know if it really changes anything. They haven't really been friendly to Israel to begin with. But regardless of all of this, we do hope that the hostages are returned, that we do see a prompt end to this war, the ending of senseless deaths in the Middle East, again, over ideology, ideology, ideology. Naveen, this is such a different um, political climate and study of history than we had growing up, where wars were over different things and over territory and over this and over that. And in the Middle East, well, they say it's over territory, but it's really over ideology, and that ideology will not quit. So we do hope for better days ahead where we can see an end to radicalism once and for all.
Russia has fired drones into Poland days after a Trump meeting with a NATO ally. And now Poland has shot down those suspected drones flying in its airspace with air support from NATO. This is the first time a NATO country has fired shots during the Russia-Ukraine war, but Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said there's no reason to believe we're on the brink of war. So, Lisa, how is Russia responding to this?
This is an interesting development in this war, not talked about enough. And I think that's because Poland is trying to de-escalate as fast as possible. And that is a smart move by the Poles. Um, instead of shrinking this war, instead of de-escalating this war and seeing an off-ramp for Putin, we're seeing this war expand. And that's not something that we want to see. That's not something the United States wants to see. Donald Trump, many times, along with Marco Rubio, have called for an end to this war. They have sat down with constituents from Russia, with Zelensky's team from Ukraine, have talked about what it means or what it could look like to end this war. And instead, we're seeing a very rogue Russia continue this war, expand this war, and not really heed the warnings of the United States. Now, in the meantime, the sanctions are going to multiply. There's going to be consequences for this ongoing war, and Russia's feeling the burn on those sanctions, of course. But when you can't deal with a madman in a diplomatic way, and that's the unfortunate truth here, and the United States is understanding that through Russia's approach to all this. But the NATO nations stand strong, stand firm against this expansion of the war, and we don't know what it will take. Naveen, that's an honest assessment of all this. We don't know what it will take for Russia to back down. I mean, do they want all of Ukraine? Do they want to go beyond that? I mean, what is it that this madman wants in order to stop this war?
Right. Now, we're almost out of time, but I want to squeeze in one more question here because the Prime Minister of Nepal has resigned after his government made the mistake of banning dozens of social media platforms in an attempt to squash a protest led by young Nepalese. The demonstrations, dubbed the Gen Z protests, began after frustrations erupted over government corruption and nepotism. These protests escalated into violence after security forces fired on protesters, killing at least 19 people. What other details can you share about this?
This is a very interesting movement. Very interesting because it is yet another social media organized movement that would have not been possible if it were not for social media and this Gen Z, as they're calling them, 18 to 23, 18 to 25 bracket, students coming out onto the streets. This is something that has been brewing for a very long time, and that is because of the economy, and that is always the case that the root of these issues is usually not these lofty thoughts of freedom and democracy, but usually something much more tangible. And in this case, a north of 20% unemployment rate in parts of the country, and the young people coming out onto the streets and saying, look at your children, and talking to the ruling class, look at your children living in the laps of luxury, and look at the rest of us that don't stand a chance in this country. So coming out onto the streets, creating their own grassroots revolution in this case, using some violence, some non-violence, but getting the job done. Now the question remains, what is the future of that country now that they have done this? A lot of questions, more than we have answers, but they got the job done, and they will continue to put the pressure on the government to remain and to get their voices heard.
Lisa Daftari is the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. Thanks so much for being with us today during this difficult time, and also on the anniversary of 9/11. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.